The Kobali Emperor's face sneered with contempt as his visage filled the view screen. "You stand on the precipice of annihilation," he declared, voice dripping with arrogance. "Submit to our rule or burn." President Samantha Carlyle stared back defiantly, knuckles white as she gripped the podium. There would be no capitulation, no surrender, not while Earth still drew breath. Around her, the Global Security Council erupted into frenzied debate. The peace faction, led by Councillor Xiang, urged caution and appeasement. A ruinous war with a superior foe could spell humanity's doom. But Admiral Greg Allen would not hear it. Submission was death by another name. Earth had to resist, had to fight, or they'd be lambs to the slaughter under Kobali boots. As the deliberations raged, Admiral Allen's comm beeped urgently, a coded transmission from the UEG Hestia, an outlying monitor station. Deep scans had detected massive energy spikes from Kobali space. The dreadnoughts were powering engines, no doubt preparing to grind humanity under their armored treads. President Carlyle's choice was made. Her voice rang out like thunder, echoing from the domed chamber. "We will never bow to alien tyranny. Earth will stand no matter the cost. This is our home, our birthright, and we will defend it to the last drop of blood, the last gasp of breath." She turned to Admiral Allen, fire in her eyes. "Admiral, prep your stealth frigate and your best men. We need intel on the Kobali, and we need it yesterday. Find us an exploit, a chink in their armor. You're our only hope." Allen saluted crisply, jaw set. Earth's finest warships were already scrambling, the UEG moving to a war footing with startling speed. They would resist. They had to. At the Xeno-Analysis Division, experts pored over the transmission, sifting through language and data for any scrap of weakness to leverage against the invaders. But the grim calculus was clear. The Kobali outmatched humanity in every conceivable metric. The battle for Earth's very survival had begun, and only a miracle would see them through. In the face of galactic hegemony, humanity had chosen to stand tall and spit defiance. There would be no tribute, no tithe or submission. If the only choices were resistance or death, Earth would resist to the bitter end. The UES Prometheus sliced through the inky void, a gleaming silver needle piercing the fabric of space. Admiral Greg Allen stood on the bridge, hands clasped behind his back, steel-gray eyes fixed on the console as stars streaked past at impossible velocities. The ship was a marvel of human ingenuity, sleek, deadly, and undetectable. But even she was a mere gnat compared to the leviathans they hunted. "Status report," Allen barked, glancing over at his XO, Commander Olivia Prescott. Her fingers danced across the glowing haptic controls, sensor data scrolling across the display faster than the eye could track. "All systems nominal, Admiral," she replied crisply. "Cloak is holding steady. We're running silent and deep." Allen nodded, a flicker of satisfaction passing over his chiseled features. The Prometheus was the culmination of Earth's most cutting-edge stealth technologies, a ghost drifting through enemy space on a whisper of fused hydrogen. If they couldn't evade the Kobali's prying eyes, no one could. Down in engineering, Lieutenant Commander Jake Sullivan wiped sweat from his brow as he pored over the cloaking system's arcane inner workings. The device was his brainchild, born from long nights fueled by cold coffee and desperate prayers. It had to hold. Failure meant death, or worse, capture. "Easy, baby," he murmured, coaxing a fluctuating power relay back into alignment with a deft twist of a spanner. "Just a little longer. We're almost there." Day bled into artificial night as the Prometheus ventured deeper into uncharted space, the Milky Way's glittering disk receding to a smudge against the cosmic dark. Tension wound tighter with each passing light year. Every sensor ghost or ionic fluctuation conjured visions of Kobali dreadnoughts, dropping out of warp with cannons primed. But Admiral Allen's crew were the best of the best, each hand-picked for their unmatched skills and nerves of titanium. They ghosted past enemy patrols with millimetric precision, sensor drones skimming the frigate's matte black hull with nary a ping. Slowly, painstakingly, they gathered the precious data that could turn the tide of the war. Dr. Ethan Reeves, the ship's brilliant xenolinguist, pored over intercepted Kobali transmissions, teasing out nuance and subtext from the harsh syllables. His eyes widened as understanding dawned. "I've got something," he called out, voice echoing through the Prometheus's hushed corridors. "The Kobali, they're not as united as we thought. There's dissent in the ranks, slave races on the verge of revolt. It's all held together by fear and brutality." Admiral Allen leaned in, a predatory glint in his eyes as Reeves laid out his findings in detail. The Kobali's Achilles' heel laid bare at last. The picture that emerged was one of a society rotten to the core, a thin veneer of technological might barely concealing the fractured realities beneath. And it was there, buried in a fragment of a transmission, that they found it. Nexus Prime, the heart of the Kobali Empire, well defended but ripe for decapitation. Admiral Allen traced his finger over the holographic star map, already seeing the pieces fall into place. "We've got them," he growled, conviction hardening his voice into a weapon. "Hit them hard, hit them fast, right where they live. Cut the head off the snake and watch the body writhe." But even as anticipation swelled in his chest, Admiral Allen knew that success would hinge on more than bullets and bombs. To lance this festering boil of a regime, they'd need the one thing the Kobali feared above all else: unity. The Saurians, the Vankari, dozens of races straining against the yoke. If humanity could bind them together, the Kobali would shatter like cheap ceramic. The Prometheus's engines roared to life once more as the stealth frigate slipped earthward, crammed stem to stern with secret knowledge. The road ahead promised blood and fire, sacrifice and loss beyond measure. But the dream of freedom, of an alliance of the willing, was worth fighting for, dying for, if need be. There would be no pleading, no placation. Earth had chosen the path of defiance, and may the stars burn before they backed down. The dread of war mingled with the heady rush of hope in the crew's hearts as they plunged homeward into the unknown. The Prometheus sliced through Earth's atmosphere, its hull glowing red-hot as it decelerated. Admiral Allen stood rigid on the bridge, his mind focused tight. The weight of the intelligence they carried pressed down on him like a physical force. As the stealth frigate touched down at UEG headquarters, a phalanx of armed guards surrounded the vessel. President Carlisle strode across the tarmac, her face a mask of relentless drive. "Welcome back, Admiral," she said, clasping his hand firmly. "I trust your mission was successful?" Allen nodded curtly. "More than we could have hoped, Madam President. But this isn't a conversation for open air." Minutes later, they were sequestered in a secure briefing room deep beneath the Earth's surface. Allen's fingers flew across a holographic display, bringing up reams of data and intercepted transmissions. "The Kobali Empire is a house of cards," he explained, his voice tight with suppressed excitement. "Dozens of slave races, all on the verge of revolt. Their technological superiority is real, but it's propped up by brutal oppression and fear." President Carlisle leaned forward, her eyes gleaming. "And Nexus Prime?" "The linchpin," Allen confirmed. "Take it out, and the whole rotten structure comes crashing down." Carlisle stood pacing the length of the room. Her mind raced, piecing together a strategy that could change the course of galactic history. "We need allies," she muttered. "Someone who can rally the slave races, coordinate their efforts with ours." "Ambassador Merrick," Allen suggested. "If anyone can forge an alliance out of this mess, it's him." Carlisle nodded sharply. "Make it happen, Admiral, and get our shipyards working overtime. When we strike, I want it to be with everything we've got." Across the galaxy, on a desolate moon orbiting a gas giant, Ambassador Jason Merrick adjusted his environment suit's seals. The rendezvous point was a ramshackle outpost, barely more than a collection of pressurized domes. A towering reptilian figure emerged from the shadows, scales glinting in the starlight. Cax Varanox, leader of the Saurian resistance. "You risk much coming here, human," Varanox hissed, his forked tongue flicking out to taste the air. Merrick spread his hands, palms out. "We all risk everything in the face of Kobali tyranny, but together we have a chance to end it once and for all." He laid out Earth's plan, painting a picture of coordinated uprisings across a dozen worlds, culminating in a surgical strike at the heart of the Empire. Varanox's eyes narrowed as he listened, his tail twitching with awe-inspiring energy. "And if we succeed," the Saurian demanded, "will Earth claim dominion over us as the Kobali did?" Merrick shook his head emphatically. "No, we seek allies, not subjects. A galaxy of free peoples, standing together against any who would enslave us." Varanox was silent for a long moment, then inclined his head. "We will fight with you, human. May our claws rend Kobali flesh, and our teeth crack their bones." On Nexus Prime, Zira's cybernetic implants hummed as she interfaced with the Imperial communication network. The Vankari slave's organic eye widened as she decrypted a fragment of a transmission. "Attack, Earth forces, Nexus Prime." Her heart raced. This was it, the chance she'd been waiting for. With trembling fingers, she composed a tightly encrypted message and sent it hurtling through subspace towards the coordinates she'd overheard. In shipyards across Earth, welding torches flared and assembler drones swarmed like metallic insects. New warships took shape, their hulls dripping with weapons reverse-engineered from captured Kobali tech. Admiral Allen stood before a holographic star map, drilling his officers on their new battle doctrine. "Hit them hard, hit them fast," he barked. "The Kobali aren't used to real opposition. We use that against them." On Nexus Prime, Emperor Taurus paced his ornate throne room, his vestigial wings twitching with agitation. "Traitors and spies everywhere," he snarled at General Zavax. "Root them out. Crush any hint of rebellion." Zavax saluted, his cybernetic eye glowing an ominous red. "It will be done, my Emperor. The slave races will learn the price of defiance." As the Praetorian Guard fanned out across the capital, Zira slipped through maintenance tunnels and waste chutes, relaying warnings to her growing network of rebels. They would be ready when Earth forces arrived. Across the galaxy, the pieces were falling into place. Earth's newly forged alliances, its rapidly growing fleet, and the seething discontent within the Kobali Empire itself, all converging towards a single defining moment. The calm before the storm settled over the galaxy, charged with potential energy. On a dozen worlds, slaves checked stolen weapons and waited for the signal. In the void between stars, Earth's fleet gathered, cloaking devices masking their approach. And on the bridge of the UES Prometheus, Admiral Greg Allen stared out at the starfield, his voice barely above a whisper. "All ships, prepare for jump to Nexus Prime." "Prime." Admiral Allen's voice rang out clear and sharp across the bridge of the UES Prometheus. "All ships, commence Operation Sci-Fi." Space itself seemed to ripple as the massive Earth fleet dropped out of stealth, materializing just outside Kryath's orbit. At the forefront of the assault force, the UES Dauntless loomed like a titan of steel and fire. Captain James Harding stood at the helm, his face tight with certainty. "Weapons free," Harding commanded. "Hit them hard and fast." The void lit up with the fury of human ingenuity. Transuranic slugs streaked across the battlefield, each one carrying enough kinetic energy to shatter a small moon. Antimatter torpedoes followed in their wake, reality itself screaming as matter and antimatter annihilated each other in cataclysmic fury. Kryath's orbital defenses, caught completely unaware, never stood a chance. Zorgak's picket ships disintegrated under the onslaught, their shields failing before they could even be raised. The planet's surface blazed with the light of 1,000 falling stars as debris rained down from the shattered defensive grid. As Earth's follow-on forces jumped into the system, Harding's tactical display lit up with an incoming transmission. The captain's eyes widened as he decrypted the message. "This is Vizara of the Groovian Resistance," a determined female voice crackled through the comm. "We have the location of Imperator Thrankil's stronghold, sending coordinates now." Harding wasted no time. "Ground teams, prepare for immediate deployment. We're going after the big fish." Across the system, the disgraced Zorgak's Admiral Krizan rallied his battered forces. His capital ships formed up, a desperate last line of defense against the human onslaught. But as Krizan opened his mouth to bark out orders, alarms blared across his command deck. A massive armada of ships dropped out of hyperspace, their designs a hodgepodge of Vrak, Groovian, and Hizari architecture. The subjugated species had risen, and their vengeance burned hotter than any star. On the surface of Krath, Captain Harding led his Marine strike force through the shattered remains of the palace defenses. Vizara, a lithe figure with iridescent scales, fought at his side. Her plasma rifle sang a song of retribution as they pushed deeper into Thrankil's sanctum. "There!" Vizara hissed, pointing towards a massive set of ornate doors. The inner chambers. The Marines stacked up, breaching charges at the ready. With a thunderous roar, the doors blew inward. And there, in all his terrible majesty, stood Imperator Thrankil. The Zorgak's leader towered over the human soldiers, his archaic techno-armor overflowing with weaponry. A phalanx of Praetorian guards formed up around him, their energy shields humming ominously. "You dare?" Thrankil's voice boomed, a sound like grinding stone. "You dare challenge the might of the Zorgak's empire?" Harding's answer came in the form of concentrated weapons fire. The Marines unleashed hell, their advanced weaponry chewing through the Praetorians' defenses. Vizara darted through the chaos, her plasma bolts finding weak points in Thrankil's armor with uncanny precision. The battle raged fierce and hot, but in the end, even the vaunted Zorgak's technology was no match for human commitment and the fury of the oppressed. As the last Praetorian fell, Harding leveled his rifle at the wounded Imperator. "It's over, Thrankil," he growled. "Surrender now and—" But Vizara was already moving. With a cry that carried the weight of centuries of suffering, she raised her weapon and fired. Thrankil's eyes widened in shock as the plasma bolt punched through his chest, and then he crumpled to the ground. "For my people," Vizara whispered, tears streaking down her scaled face. "For all those you murdered." As news of Thrankil's death spread across the Zorgak's networks, the remains of their once mighty fleet began to crumble. Some captains chose surrender, while others fought on in increasingly desperate last stands. On Kra'ath, Vizara stood before a sea of newly liberated faces. Gruvian, Vrok, Hizari, and a dozen other species. Her voice rang out, carrying to every corner of the planet and beyond. "The long night of Zorgak's tyranny is over," she declared. "A new day dawns for all free peoples of the galaxy." But even as cheers erupted across a dozen worlds, Captain Harding's comlink chirped urgently. Admiral Allen's voice came through, tense and focused. "Harding, we're picking up strange energy readings from the far side of Krath's largest moon. Whatever it is, it's big and it's powering up fast." Captain Harding's eyes narrowed as he processed Admiral Allen's transmission. "Understood, sir. We're on our way." He turned to Vizara, whose scales shimmered in the flickering light of the ruined throne room. "We've got another situation. Can you handle things here?" The Gruvian resistance leader nodded firmly. "Go! We'll secure the planet." Within minutes, Harding's strike team was back aboard their dropship, rocketing towards the UES Dauntless. As they approached the massive warship, Harding's breath caught in his throat. The far side of Krath's largest moon was now visible, and with it, a colossal structure that seemed to defy the laws of physics. A titanic ring, easily the size of a small planet, pulsed with coruscating energy. At its center, a swirling vortex of impossible colors tore at the fabric of space-time itself. "What in the hell is that?" Harding muttered as he strapped into the captain's chair. Before anyone could respond, a barrage of data flooded the tactical screens. Hundreds, then thousands of signatures erupted from the vortex. Ships of all shapes and sizes, but all bearing the unmistakable biomechanical aesthetics of the Zorgaks. "It's a gateway," Lieutenant Commander Chen breathed, her fingers flying over the sensor controls. "They're not just an empire, they're an invasion force." Harding's eyes sharp. "All ships, battle stations. This isn't over yet." Across the system, the jubilant celebrations of newly liberated worlds gave way to a fresh wave of panic. The combined Earth rebel fleet, still reeling from the brutal assault on Krath, scrambled to regroup. Admiral Allen's voice crackled over the comm, strained but resolute. "This is Fleet Command to all Allied vessels. Form up on the Prometheus. We hold the line here, regardless of the cost." As the titanic clash unfolded in the skies above Krath, a different kind of battle raged in the halls of power across the galaxy. Ambassador Jason Merrick found himself thrust into the center of a diplomatic maelstrom. The UES Odyssey blazed across the stars, racing from one critical summit to another. In chambers filled with the strangest assemblage of species humanity had ever encountered, Merrick fought with words and ideas instead of weapons. "We've bled together," he urged a gathering of rock elders, their tentacles writhing with impossibly strong skepticism. "Now we must stand together, or everything we've fought for will be lost." On the industrial hellscape of Kradath Prime, Lieutenant Alex Bauer led his Marine platoon through smoke-choked tunnels. The acrid stench of molten ore filled the air as they pushed deeper into the Zorgax slave mines. "Contact front," Private Rodriguez called out. A hail of plasma bolts erupted from a fortified position ahead. Bauer's mind raced, assessing angles and cover in an instant. "Chen, Kowalski, suppressing fire left. Vasquez, with me." They moved like a well-oiled machine, leapfrogging from cover to cover. As they closed in on the Zorgax position, Bauer caught a glimpse of cowering figures behind the gun emplacement, civilian workers used as living shields. Without hesitation, Bauer vaulted over a fallen girder. His rifle spat precise bursts, taking out the Zorgax gunners with surgical precision. As he landed in a roll, he came face to face with the towering form of Overseer Calarax. The Zorgax commander's cyber-augmented fist lashed out, faster than any human eye could track. But Bauer was already moving, his combat neural implants pushing his reflexes beyond normal limits. He ducked under the blow, using Calarax's momentum against him. In a blur of movement, Bauer had the massive alien in an arm lock, his combat knife pressed against a vital junction of flesh and metal. "Stand down," Bauer growled. "It's over." As Calarax's troops lowered their weapons, the freed slaves emerged from hiding, their eyes belonging to a dozen different species, fixed on Bauer with a mixture of awe and budding hope. But even as victories were won on 100 worlds, the shadow of an even greater threat loomed. Long-range probes brought back disturbing images of a vast armada moving inexorably towards Alliance space. The Rajavi swarm approached, a tide of chitinous horror that threatened to overwhelm everything in its path. On New Avalon, the rechristened capital of Kraath, President Samantha Carlyle stood before the newly formed Concord Convention. Representatives from every liberated world packed the massive amphitheater, their faces a kaleidoscope of alien features, united by a common purpose. "We face a threat unlike any we've encountered," Carlyle's voice rang out, clear and strong. "But we do not face it alone. Today, we stand united. Today, we forge a new future for all sentient beings in this galaxy." As she spoke, the first waves of the Rajavi swarm entered the outer reaches of Alliance space. Fleet Marshal Greg Allen, his body still bearing the scars of recent battles, took command of the combined Allied forces. Aboard the refitted and upgraded UES Prometheus, Allen's eyes swept over the tactical display. Thousands of ships from 100 worlds formed up around his position, ready to make their stand. "All ships," he commanded, his voice carrying across the vast Allied armada. "Prepare to engage." "Prepare to engage," Fleet Marshal Greg Allen commanded, his voice carrying across the vast Allied armada. The tactical display before him lit up with thousands of friendly signatures, representing ships from 100 worlds united against the Rajavi threat. But as Allen opened his mouth to give the order to advance, an urgent transmission cut through the battle chatter. "Marshal Allen, this is President Carlyle. Stand down. I repeat, stand down." A ripple of confusion spread through the bridge crew. Allen's brow furrowed as he responded, "Madam President, the Rajavi swarm is at our doorstep. We need to strike now." "Negative, Marshal. We have new intelligence. Report to New Avalon immediately for an emergency briefing." Hours later, Allen found himself in a secure conference room deep beneath the Capitol's surface. President Samantha Carlyle stood at the head of the table, her face etched with lines of worry. To her left sat Ambassador Jason Merrick, looking haggard but determined. "The situation has changed," Carlyle began without preamble. "Long-range probes have detected a massive Rajavi armada on a direct course for former Zorgax territory. Their numbers, they dwarf anything we've faced before." Allen's stomach twisted. How long do we have? Weeks at most, Merrick replied, his voice grim. But that's not our only problem. The ambassador activated a holographic display, revealing a sea of red warning indicators spread across Alliance space. Civil unrest is spreading like wildfire. Millions of former Zorgak slaves are homeless, and security forces are struggling to maintain order. We're seeing outbreaks of violence between rival liberated worlds. We need time, Carlyle said, her eyes locked on Alan. Time to stabilize our internal situation before we can face this external threat. That's why I'm reassigning you, Marshal. We need you to lead a campaign to liberate the outlying Zorgax colonies, still under Loyalist control. Alan's protest died on his lips as he saw the willpower in Carlyle's eyes. He simply nodded. Understood, Madame President. Where do we start? The answer came from an unexpected source. Lieutenant Alex Bauer, head of Merrick's security detail, stepped forward. Sirion, sir. It's an aquatic world, strategically vital, but our intel suggests heavy resistance from a Zorgax warlord named Gortak. Merrick nodded in agreement. I'll be joining you on this one, Marshal. The native Sirians are notoriously xenophobic, but if we can win them over, their reinforcements could turn the tide. As the meeting concluded, Alan couldn't shake a sense of unease. The assembled leadership filed out, leaving him alone with President Carlyle. There's more, isn't there? He asked quietly. Carlyle's shoulders sagged. We're pursuing alternative strategies. Ambassador Merrick is brokering negotiations between the Vrok, Hizari, and Sarek. If we can unite them under a common banner, and if we can't? The president's eyes hardened. Then we look to less savory allies. We've made contact with the Kraathan theocracy. Alan's blood ran cold. The Zorgax cultists? Samantha, you can't be serious. We don't have a choice, Greg. To survive the Rajavi, we need every asset we can get our hands on, even if those assets were our enemies mere weeks ago. As Alan left the conference room, his mind raced with the enormity of the task ahead. The Rajavi swarm loomed on the horizon, an existential threat to everything they had fought for. But before they could face that enemy, they had to secure their own house. The UES Prometheus blazed through hyperspace, leading a task force towards Sirion. In his quarters, Alan pored over tactical data on Warlord Gortak's forces, but his thoughts kept drifting to the bigger picture, the fragile alliance they were trying to forge, the desperate deals being made in the shadows. He knew that the coming weeks would test them all. The battles ahead would be fought not just with weapons, but with words, with compromise, and perhaps even with their very ideals. As the Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace above the azure orb of Sirion, Alan steeled himself for the challenges to come. The azure orb of Sirion loomed large in the viewports as the UES Prometheus dropped out of hyperspace. Fleet Marshal Greg Allen barely had time to take in the sight before alarms blared across the bridge. Multiple contacts, Lieutenant Commander Chen called out. Razavi scout ships, sir. They've beaten us here. Alan's mind focused. Battle stations, all ships form up on our flank. We take out those scouts before they can report back. As the Alliance fleet engaged the Razavi advance force, Ambassador Jason Merrick found himself in a very different kind of battle. The Grand Chamber of the Avalon Senate buzzed with tension as representatives from dozens of worlds argued, pleaded, and threatened. Order! Merrick's voice cut through the din. We cannot hope to stand against the Rajavi if we're at each other's throats. The Avalon Treaty offers a path forward for all of us. A Hizari delegate, her iridescent feathers ruffled with agitation, stood to speak. And who decided humans should lead this alliance? Your kind are newcomers to the stars. Before Merrick could respond, the chamber erupted in an explosion of light and sound. The ambassador felt a body slam into him, driving him to the floor as debris rained down. When the ringing in his ears subsided, he found Lieutenant Alex Bauer crouched protectively over him. Vrok extremists, Bauer growled, his eyes scanning for threats. We need to get you out of here, sir. As they made their way through the chaos, Merrick caught glimpses of the carnage. Injured delegates of a dozen species cried out for help. His heart sank as he realized how close they'd come to losing everything. On the industrial world of Mordrak, Captain James Harding led his mixed force of human marines and Groovian auxiliaries through the smoky ruins of a manufacturing complex. Vrock insurgents had dug in deep, turning the entire planet into a fortress. "Watch your six," Harding barked as plasma bolts sizzled past. "Groovian heavies, lay down suppressing fire on that bunker." The battle-hardened captain had seen his share of warfare, but nothing quite like this. The Vrock fought with a fanatical zeal, willing to reduce entire cities to ash rather than submit to Alliance rule. As night fell on Mordrak, Harding received a priority transmission from Fleet Command. The Rjavi swarm had accelerated its advance, overwhelming the outer defense lines. They needed every ship, every soldier they could spare. Harding's fists clenched as he weighed his options. They were so close to breaking the Vrock's hold on Mordrak. To pull out now would undo weeks of brutal fighting. But if the Rjavi weren't stopped... "All units," he announced over the comm, his voice heavy. "Prep for immediate evac. We're redeploying to the Rjavi front." Back on Avalon, the dust was still settling from the terrorist attack when President Samantha Carlyle convened an emergency meeting of her war cabinet. The holograms of key military and political leaders flickered around the table, their faces grim. "The Kra'athan theocracy," Carlyle said, her voice tight with anger. "Our own intelligence confirms they supplied the Vrock with weapons. They played us for fools." Admiral Allen's hologram nodded. "Madame President, with your authorization, I can have a strike team ready within the hour. We take out their leadership, destabilize their whole power structure." Carlyle's eyes narrowed as she considered the weight of the decision before her. The Kra'athan were a powerful faction, and moving against them could shatter the fragile alliance. But allowing their betrayal to go unanswered was unthinkable. "Do it," she said at last. "Lieutenant Bauer will lead the operation. We end this now." As the cabinet meeting adjourned, Carlyle found herself alone with Ambassador Merrick. The usually unflappable diplomat looked shaken, a bandage visible beneath his collar. "We're losing them, Samantha," Merrick said quietly. "Every act of violence, every betrayal, it pushes us further apart. How can we stand united against the Rjavi when we can barely trust each other?" Carlyle placed a hand on his shoulder. "Then we give them something to unite behind, Jason. A common enemy, a shared purpose. We show them that together we're stronger than any force that threatens us." As they spoke, Lieutenant Bauer and his team were already en route to the Kra'athan holy world of Sanctus Prime. Their mission, to capture or eliminate the Vakara and his inner circle, cutting off the head of the serpent that threatened to destroy everything they had fought for. The galaxy stood on a knife's edge. The Rjavi swarm pressed ever closer, while the Alliance teetered on the brink of collapse. In the coming days, the actions of a few would determine the fate of countless billions across the stars. The UES Prometheus emerged from hyperspace above Athrak, its hull still bearing scorch marks from recent skirmishes. Admiral Allen stood on the bridge, his weathered face illuminated by the glow of tactical displays. "Multiple Zorgax capital ships detected," Lieutenant Chen reported. "They've adopted a defensive formation around the primary orbital station." Allen's eyes narrowed as he studied the holographic representation. "Supreme Commander Gremak," he muttered, "still as predictable as ever." The Admiral opened a secure channel to Colonel Artak G, the Ashkran strategist whose brilliance had proven invaluable in recent campaigns. "Colonel, it's time to put your plan into action." Artak's reptilian features filled the screen. "Understood, Admiral. Initiating Operation Phantom Dagger." Across the Athrak system, dozens of Alliance ships began broadcasting false sensor signatures, creating the illusion of a massive invasion force. Gremak's fleet responded predictably, spreading thin to counter the perceived threat. On the humid surface of Athrak, Captain James Harding and his Marine Strike Force moved silently through dense jungle. Sweat poured down their faces as they approached the Zorgax defensive perimeter. "All units, prepare for Phase 2, Harding whispered into his comm. He raised a fist, signaling his troops to halt as a patrol of hulking Zorgax shock troopers passed nearby. Once the coast was clear, Harding's team advanced on the enemy's flank. The sound of distant explosions echoed through the canopy as Alliance ships engaged Gremak's fleet in orbit. Aboard the Prometheus, Lieutenant Alex Bauer worked feverishly to complete his jury-rigged ion cannon. Sparks flew as he connected the final power couplings. "Engineering to bridge," Bauer called out. "The weapon is ready, but we'll only get one shot before it burns out." Alan's voice crackled through the intercom. "Understood, Lieutenant. Make it count." In space, the battle raged. Gremac's tactics were ruthless and efficient, but the false signatures had drawn away much of his strength. The Prometheus maneuvered into position, its makeshift weapon powering up. "Fire!" Alan commanded. A brilliant beam of energy lanced out, striking Gremac's flagship. The massive vessel's shields flickered and died, its systems overloaded by the ion surge. On the ground, Harding saw his opportunity. "All units, engage!" he shouted, leading the charge against the now disorganized Zorgak's defenses. The battle for Athrak raged for hours, but the outcome was never truly in doubt. With their orbital support crippled and their flank exposed, the Zorgak's forces crumbled. As the dust settled, Admiral Allen received a priority transmission from President Carlisle. Her hologram appeared before him, her expression a mix of relief and purpose. "Excellent work, Greg," she said. "With Athrak secure, we can finally move forward with centralizing our government on New Avalon." Allen nodded. "What's our next move?" Carlisle's eyes hardened. "We need to ratify the Charter of Unity. It's the only way to hold this coalition together. I'm sending Ambassador Merrick to oversee the process." As the Prometheus set course for New Avalon, carrying the key players who would shape the future of the Alliance, none could have predicted the challenges that lay ahead. The fight for unity had only just begun. The gleaming spires of New Avalon rose before them as the Prometheus settled into orbit. Admiral Allen watched the sprawling metropolis through the viewport, his mind already racing with the challenges ahead. "Sir," Lieutenant Chen called out, "President Carlisle is requesting your presence planetside immediately." Allen nodded, straightening his uniform. "Have my shuttle prepared." The journey to the surface was swift, and soon Allen found himself striding through the corridors of the presidential palace. He entered a secure briefing room to find Carlisle deep in conversation with a holographic projection of Lieutenant Bauer. "Greg," Carlisle acknowledged, motioning him to join them. "We were just discussing Alex's promotion." Bauer's hologram flickered as he spoke. "Admiral Allen, it's an honor. I only wish the circumstances were better." "Congratulations, Admiral Bauer," Allen said, noting the new rank insignia on the younger man's uniform. "I take it this has to do with the Grenic situation?" Carlisle's expression tightened. "Precisely. Alex, brief us on the current status." Bauer's hologram expanded, displaying a tactical overlay of the Grenic system. "Overlord Garadix has fortified his position around the shipyards. Our intelligence suggests he's using Grenic workers as living shields." Allen studied the defenses, his brow furrowing. A direct assault would result in unacceptable casualties. "Which is why we're initiating Operation Thunderbolt," Carlisle interjected. "Alex will lead a strike team using experimental warp gate technology to bypass Garadix's blockade." Bauer's face was grim but determined. "We've assembled an elite force of human Marines and Hizari commandos. If we can secure a landing zone quickly, we can bring in heavier support." As they delved into the operation specifics, a priority alert flashed across the room's main display. Ambassador Merrick's face appeared, his usually calm demeanor visibly shaken. "Madam President," Merrick said urgently, "we have a situation on New Avalon. Kroathan radicals are attempting a coup. They've already breached the outer security perimeter of the government district." Carlisle's eyes narrowed. "How did this happen, Jason?" "They're exploiting the instability caused by the Grenic crisis," Merrick explained. "My team and I are secure for now, but we need reinforcements." Allen turned to Carlisle. "Ma'am, I can have a rapid response team deployed within minutes." She nodded sharply. "Do it. And Greg, I want you to personally oversee the defense of New Avalon. We can't let this fledgling alliance fall apart now." As alarms blared across the capital, Allen rushed to mobilize his forces. In orbit, Admiral Bauer's strike team prepared to embark on their perilous mission to Grenic. The fate of the newly formed Avalon Dominion hung in the balance, with battles about to be waged on multiple fronts. On the distant world of Thrakis, Colonel Artak G led his team deeper into the subterranean labyrinth, unaware of the horrifying discovery that awaited them. The galaxy teetered on the brink of chaos, and the actions of a few would determine the course of history for countless civilizations. The Greenwich shipyards loomed before Admiral Bauer's fleet, a sprawling complex of orbital platforms and construction docks. Overlord Garadix's forces had transformed the once bustling industrial center into a fortified stronghold, using the Greenwich workers as living shields. "All ships maintain formation," Bauer ordered, his voice steady despite the weight of responsibility. "Prepare for warp gate activation on my mark." Lieutenant Chen's voice crackled over the comm. "Sir, experimental warp drive primed and ready." Bauer took a deep breath. "Execute Operation Thunderbolt." Reality twisted around them as the fleet surged through the artificial wormhole. In an instant, they materialized behind Garadix's defenses, catching the enemy completely off guard. "Launch all fighters! Marine teams, commence boarding operations!" Bauer barked. Chaos erupted as Alliance forces struck from within the Greenwich blockade. Garadix's ships scrambled to respond, but the element of surprise had given Bauer's team a crucial advantage. On the bridge of his flagship, Overlord Garadix raged at his subordinates. "How did they breach our perimeter? Obliterate them!" But it was too late. Human Marines and Hizari commandos swarmed through the shipyards, engaging in brutal close-quarters combat. Bauer's precision strikes had crippled Garadix's command and control systems, leaving his forces in disarray. As the battle raged, Chancellor Carlisle addressed the Dominion from her office on New Avalon. "Citizens of the Alliance, today we strike a blow against those who would threaten our hard-won peace. The liberation of Greenwich is just the beginning." Her words were interrupted by an urgent message from Grand Marshal Allen. "Madam Chancellor, long-range probes have detected a massive force crossing the galactic rim. It's the Rajavi swarm, and they're headed straight for us." Carlisle's face hardened. "Understood, Marshal. Initiate Directive Omega. We end this threat before it begins." In the Villiers Nebula, Admiral Bauer's strike force emerged from warp, cloaked ships gliding silently through the cosmic dust. Before them lay the staging grounds of the Rajavi Armada, countless bioships pulsing with alien life. "All ships, arm antimatter warheads," Bauer commanded. "Fire on my mark." The ensuing detonation was beyond imagination. A chain reaction of apocalyptic proportions tore through the Rajavi fleet, vaporizing nearly half their forces in an instant. But victory came at a terrible cost. Bauer watched in horror as Rajavi counterattacks shredded his command. "All surviving ships, fall back to Rally Point Omega." On the Rajavi throne world of Alpha Zarxon, Fleet Patriarch Zarxok's rage echoed across the hive mind. "The vermin dare strike at us? Initiate the Armageddon protocols. We will consume every world, every star, until nothing remains but the swarm." Trillions of Rajavi bioships surged forth, a tide of alien horror that swept aside the battered Alliance fleets. World after world fell, stripped of all life and resources to fuel the endless swarm. Chancellor Carlisle stood before the War Council, her voice grim. "We have no choice. Implement Directive Zero." Grand Marshal Allen's face paled. "Madame Chancellor, the civilian casualties will be nothing compared to what the Rajavi will inflict if we fail." Carlisle cut him off. "Do it." Across the frontier, hellfire rained from the skies. Argonan weapons seared the atmosphere from entire planets. Ancient Zorgak superweapons ignited stars into furious supernovae, incinerating whole systems. But still the Rajavi came. In the depths of space, Admiral Bauer received his final orders, a suicide mission to the heart of Alpha Zarxon itself. As his skeleton crew prepared for the jump, Bauer allowed himself one last moment of reflection. "For Earth," he whispered, "for all of us." The warp engines flared to life, catapulting them towards destiny.
You have reached the end of the story. If you enjoyed this story and want to support us, please leave a like and subscribe to our channel, and for every comment that says 88, I will heart every single one of them. Thank you for your time.